So that's the first element to think about. What's the personality of your brand? Second one, and the one probably most people think about, is the visual identity. Sure, how do you look? Logo, colors, fonts, that kind of stuff. Yep, that's important. That's an element of it. The most important bit, and the piece we're going to be spending most time on today, is what we call your proposition or your messaging. It's clearly unpacking what do you offer? What's your promise to your audience? And this is where we often see brands of all different types, shapes, sizes, really struggle. They struggle. They might look great. They might have a clear personality, but actually when it gets to it, are they clear about what it is they offer and why someone, the audience, should care? And we'll get into that in a few minutes. And finally, positioning. And positioning is important. It's where you stand in relation to your peers, competitors. Most of your audience will have a choice, okay? So they will have a choice whether they beneficiaries opt into your services or another charities, or they customers buy your products versus those of another social enterprise or profit-making venture, whether clients choose your consultancy, whatever it is, they're almost certainly going to be framing you in relation to the alternatives. Who else is out there? What else out there? What other choices could I be making? Why do I choose your brand? And positioning is where we get very intentional about how we are different from the alternatives. Not that they're necessarily worse or that we're necessarily better. Hopefully we are, but it's more around being clear on how we're different. So hopefully that gives you a picture of what it's just a picture of the pieces of your brand that you need to be aware of. And before we get into the next stage and look at messaging and introduce the StoryBrand Framework, does anyone have any questions about this introductory piece around defining brand and this illustration of your brand? Please do put it in the chat, or you can speak up, and that's absolutely fine. And we'll just leave a couple of minutes for any questions before we move on to the next part.
I want to confirm, like, how would you say the behavior is different from the personality of the brand?
Yeah, so no,
Like some like synonym.
yeah, that's a really good question. So think of the behavior as literally people's behavior. So if you think of all the internal things being ultimately lived out by the leaders, the staff, the volunteers, the consultants, whoever it is, what behaviors are they carrying, if you like, when they go into the outside world? The personality is more of something that you create. So I don't know, Ton, for example, if you went to on our website and you looked at you read some of the copy and the tone of voice and the type of imagery, you'd get a feel for like the personality of the brand as it's kind of being constructed, as it's been pulled together. So think of the external piece as largely being about things that you're creating, whether it's website, video, brochures, presentations, all that kind of stuff. And think of the internal piece being primarily around what people carry around, what people have been taught, the culture inside the organization, and then what people are then carrying around as they kind of do their job, if you like. But good question, because you're right. There's definitely some similarities there. And you would imagine there'd be some overlap, right? You shouldn't be thinking, oh, my brand is really serious and intellectual and thoughtful and rigorous, and then the behavior of your staff is quite playful and down to earth and adventurous. Let's be like, oh, okay, there's a little bit of a disconnect there. So yeah, they should actually be some connection or overlap. Any other questions about this diagram and this idea of how we can conceive of our brand before I move on to the next exercise? Okay, great. So we're going to look at proposition, and this is where a lot of organizations really struggle. So a lot of organizations, and I think particularly for good organizations, really struggle to coherently unpack who they are, what it is they do, and why that matters to their audience. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. I think one of the reasons is that we all get into the trap of thinking that the focus should be on us. So we become very brand centric. Oh, we do this stuff. We're amazing. Look at us. And we lose the audience, the customer, the client, the beneficiary, because we're not making the focus on them. We're not speaking to them. It feels like we're just speaking about ourselves. And I think one of the other challenges, and I think particularly in the for good space, is we can almost get too wrapped up in the mission. So I think there's a danger with social enterprises, not-for-profits, for good businesses, that we get very focused on the impact on the mission. And that's great. But what it doesn't then do is clearly articulate what we offer to whom and why they should care. It's almost, we've leapt to the end story, if you like. We've leapt to the bigger vision, the why, and that's exciting, but is also hard to differentiate. And we end up sometimes sounding very much like all these other aid and development charities, all these other grassroots social enterprises working on I don't know, working on certain environmental issues or whatever it is. We can start to lose that distinctiveness of what it is that we bring and why our audience should care. So I want to get into this in a bit more detail, and I want us to do something a bit practical, and hopefully a number of you will be up for giving this a try and sharing your thoughts. We'll see. Hopefully I'll persuade you to yeah, to give this a try and share it with the group. Okay, so I want you to think about your story. So I imagine all of you here, because you have a community venture, a social enterprise, a business, a not-for-profit. There's some group, there's some project, there's some enterprise that you are leading, and that enterprise has a story. It has a narrative, and often it's very hard for us to tease out what that story is. We end up starting in lots of different places, or we tell like lots of different stories, or we might just tell one story about like a beneficiary, or one story about a particular place, but actually we don't tell the story of what we're doing, the story of the brand. And I'd like to introduce you to a framework called StoryBrand, written by a chap called Donald Miller. So Donald Miller is a business coach and marketer, and he came up with this quite simple framework a number of years ago that literally, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of businesses and charities and for-profits and not-for-profits have used down the years. And it's a simple way of unpacking who you are and what you do in a story narrative. So I'd like to just walk you through the 7 points of the StoryBrand framework as a little bit of an introduction, and to get us thinking about how do we describe to the outside world who we are using a more of a story narrative. So stay with me. Let me sort of unpack it a little bit for you. I'll then share the framework, which is free, by the way, and you can create an online account and do this yourself. But I'll kind of share the framework, and we'll see if we can maybe tease out for a few of you what this story might be for your brand. Okay, and really, I guess the premise here is, if your message isn't clear, chances are nobody will listen or remember who you are, what you do. You will just become part of the noise, the backdrop. Oh yeah, it's another social enterprise I came across the other day. Oh yeah, it's another for good business. And actually that clarity will be lost, and that recall will be lost. And really the whole framework is around turning the focus onto the audience and speaking to them and their needs. What's going to help them to survive and thrive, and turning the focus inside out. And really the insight that the author Donald Miller had is basically that every time we have to process any new information, so that includes meeting people, but that includes getting our head around new brands, new organizations, every time we have to process new information, we're burning calories, right? We're burning calories in our brain. And actually, what we need to do to help our audience, we need to make it simpler so they burn less calories and it's less hard work. The less hard work we make it, the more likely we will be remembered, not forgotten. So here is this framework that I want to introduce to you, and then we can try and explore working on together. So the first step is introduce a character. The character is the hero of the story. So this is probably the first and most important thing to say. You, your brand, your organization is not the hero of the story. And that might be quite hard to get your head around. I think particularly for those of us in the for good space, we're used to feeling like, oh no, we're the hero, we're the one coming to someone's rescue or to someone's aid. But actually in this story, you're not the hero, you're the characters. Now the character could be your customer, it could be your beneficiary, it could be your donor, it could be your partner, it could be your clients. I know there's several different types of organizations out there. So, but they are, whoever it is that you're wanting to get involved with your programs or consume your products or buy your services, they are the character. They're the hero of the story. Who is your main character? Maybe there's several characters and potentially you need to have a few different stories. So actually a really good example of that straight away. If you are a social enterprise, you may well have beneficiary. Well, actually, if you're a not-for-profit, you will likely have beneficiaries and you'll have donors. Two very different audiences, two different stories that need to be told for them. Social enterprise, yeah, that depends on your funding model. That might be that you just have customers or clients, and that could be more, a singular character or character type. But think about who's the character, who's the main character of the story. And that character has a problem. So what's disrupting their life, their work, their existence? What is the problem that they have that you are here to help solve? And we need to start there before we jump into, oh, we're amazing, or we do this, or we've got this great product or service, or we really care about X, Y, Z. No. Step into their shoes. What's disrupting their life, their work existence right now? And it is going to be a mix of external problems, as in something you can touch and see, something probably that's quite rational or tangible, like, oh, I have a problem of a lack of time. I'm too busy to do a certain thing that I know I need to do to move my business forward, for example, if it was me. But I also have internal challenges, problems that are more emotive. And that might be around self-doubt or am I good enough? Am I good enough to make it? Am I able to lead this business? So there's always going to be a mix of these more external, rational, and internal motive problems going on. And if we can pinpoint what the main ones are, we can we can really address them in our story. So, and this character who has a problem meets a guide. Now, you are the guide. Hopefully you've realized this by now. If you're not the hero of the story, you are the guide. And all your customers or your beneficiaries, your clients, they're looking for a guide. We're all looking for a guide in our lives, aren't we? And this of course is the story of so many stories, by the way. And this is the framework of the story brand. The idea is really picking up on the arc of narrative. So you can think about your favorite movie or your favorite book, and you will see this being plotted, and your favorite guide, whether it's, I don't know, Yoda from Star Wars or Samwise Gamgee from Lord of the Rings, or insert your own sort of favorite narrative. But I want you to think of yourself as that character that you are. Sorry, I want you to think of yourself as the guide, not as the hero. So the guide is who your customers are looking for. You are the one that has the answer to the problems. And they really want to know that you get it. So your customers, your clients, your beneficiaries, they want to know that you understand what's going on in their world, you understand their problems, and you're on their side. And most importantly, you give them a plan. So step 4, who gives them a plan? A clear plan, a clear path. And this is where we get into products, services, support. What is the thing that you have that is going to answer their question? How does it solve my problem? How does it solve my problem? So giving them a clear plan and calls them to action. So let's say I'm a potential client for your social enterprise consultancy. One of you said, I think it was, or a purpose-driven consultancy. I might get to the point of, okay, I've met you, you're speaking to my problem, you've got a plan, but also you've got to call me to action. You've got to say, well, what steps do I need to take to get hold of this plan? What do I actually need to do? Clear, direct step that our customers can take, and it must be immediate and practical. So you might be thinking, oh, we've got this longer term thing where we'll work with you for 3 years, and that's fine, but there also needs to be an immediate, what is it? Sign up online, come and see us, book an appointment, get through the door. What is that first immediate action that you're going to call them to? And finally, that results in two things. And this is quite interesting but important. You've got to hold two things in tension. So one is of, achieving success, but also avoiding failure. So let's look at success. So if we're achieving success, we're painting a picture of this promised land, this ideal state. So we're not just going, okay, we're here for you, and we understand that you have a problem, and this is who we are, and the plan that we offer, and what you need to do next, and then go, great, get on with it. We need to then almost paint this picture of this is where you want to end up. This is the promised land. This is the ideal state. This is the vision being achieved. And it needs to avoid failure. And look, this is light touch, so I'm not saying that you should all like really bang this drum hard, but sometimes actually it can help to remind people what's at stake. So what's the cost of not buying into your services, or not buying that product, or not signing up to that program? What is actually at stake? So almost show how you're helping them to avoid some negative consequences. Again, just to get that real clear balance and that perspective. Yeah, I want to end up here. I don't want to end up here. Okay, I'm going to be quite brave because I'm going to show you an example of this at a very high level for Catalyst 2030. Now, obviously, there's a number of Catalyst 2030 staff, including com staff here, and we've been working on them for a project in the background. But I've basically taken the work that we've done and put it into this framework. But I've done that just to try and help us put this into, just to show you a living example. And then I will take some questions, and then I will share a document with you and see who would like to give this a go for their own brand and telling their brand story. So, okay, let's do this for Catalyst 2030. So those are the 7 steps of the brand story. What might that look like for Catalyst 2030? So, step 1, introduce the character. We're here for local social innovators with a global outlook. Step 2, what's the problem they have? Too busy and isolated, and they fear their impact will be small. So too busy and isolated, very external, you can tangible, rational. Fear the impact. They won't have the impact that they really want to have. That's quite emotive. That's quite an internal problem. But that's the problem that we understand and we want to speak to. 3, introduce ourselves as the guide. Catalyst 2030, a global network for social innovators. Step 4, who has a plan? Our plan is to help you connect and learn from your peers, raise your voice and be heard, be part of new collaborations. Okay, so that is what we are offering through this network. That's the plan that we put. But can't just do that. We need to call them to action. So our first step action is join as a member today for free, which I think most of you, if not all of you, have already done this as you're here. And that is going to result in the following. It's going to help you to realize your full potential as a social innovator, and it's going to help avoid you staying small, busy, and isolated with limited impact. So that is, again, a way that we can frame the story of Catalyst 2030. And then just a final step, I want to show you how we might convert that. How might we convert this framework, this canvas, this kind of story canvas into actual external facing copy? And it might look something like this. All over the world, social entrepreneurs are busy responding to local needs and bringing change to their communities. They have the potential to change the world. The problem, there's nowhere they can go to learn from their peers, elevate their voice, and extend their impact. And that's where Catalyst 2030 comes in. We're here for local social innovators with a global mindset. With over 4,000 members from 134 countries. Together, we are building a peer-to-peer network, a platform for change, a forum for collaboration. We're here to help the world's social innovators join forces and unleash their potential to bring lasting change, locally, regionally, and globally. Again, this isn't final, this isn't gospel, this is a variation of something we've been working on, but I wanted to use it just to show the principles in action. So I hope you can see that how I've sort of flowed through the principles of this framework into, okay, yeah, we've got the key kind of talking points, if you like, and then we converted that into copy. And we could have started in a very different place. We could have just gone straight and going, we are Catalyst 2030 and we do 1, 2, 3, and we've done it for these people, and aren't we amazing? And this is the vision, and us. But actually the whole focus here is actually we're not the hero. We're heroing You were hearing the social entrepreneurs, the social innovators. So I hope you can see that as a, yeah, you can see that idea, principle, in action. I want to pause here before we get into the practical exercise and just see if anyone had any specific questions. Is everything clear about the StoryBrand framework? Does that make sense? Is there anything that you're just struggling to even kind of get a grip on before we kind of get into the practical exercise that we'll do? Please, yeah, please speak up either on chat or give me a shout before we get into the next steps. Okay. Thank you. Yes, Tashwa, it makes sense, but I struggle to put to my own brand. Okay. Ethically sourced home decor. Okay. I think you can definitely do this for ethically sourced home decor, Tashwa. Let me share with you the framework in a moment. I'll put it in the chat and give you a few minutes. Just start to put in some of the points, but I think you can definitely apply this. I'm confident it can be applied. Zarika says, thanks, Dave. I'm really enjoying the session. We're off to a great start. I run a small non-profit NGO focused on well-being youth empowerment in my country while working for a big INGO. However, I'm here because I'm soon starting my master's degree. I have two questions. What is your opinion on the use of overly used keywords such as change the world or disruptive innovation in brand storytelling? Great question. How can brands effectively differentiate themselves while still conveying impactful messages? And how do you measure the effectiveness of brand storytelling beyond traditional metrics like engagement? All right. Oh, gosh. All right. Put it simply, what makes you happy at the end of the day? Okay. These are really good questions, Zarika. So, very briefly, Zarika, to your questions in the NGO world, the use of the overuse of keywords like change the world, disruptive innovation is absolutely an issue. And I can say this, I'm sure in front of you, we've had a conversation, with Catalyst 2030 about some things like, oh gosh, I'm so I'll give you an example. I've got three not-for-profits convening organizations, and they're all wrestling with to overuse terms like systems change. Systems change is a great example. It's a term that a number of not-for-profits has jumped on, and it's challenging for two reasons. One, it's overused, and two, it's intangible. So I think change the world is a great example of just an overused term that therefore loses meaning just by virtue of being saturated, spread too thin. And disruptive innovation is probably a good example of one that also isn't great because it lacks a tangible quality. It's like, okay, but what do we mean? So, yeah, I think one of the ways that brands, even before they get into differentiating, I think one of the challenges for a lot of brands is to, and this is partly why I'm introducing this framework to you, is to find a simple, tangible way of describing what you're doing, why you're here, and avoid. I think it's really easy. We all do it. I don't care whether you're in the big corporates or startup or social enterprise or INGOs. We all end up in spaces where we fall into cliches and we overuse terms like that. So, and it doesn't help. It doesn't help the storytelling exactly because actually I'm not clear that you understand my problem or what the plan is that you have. All I know is that you're using terms that everyone else is using. So yeah, I think that's really important. And it's one of the reasons that this framework I think can help us challenge us and shift us out of those cliche kind of traps. And then to your second point around measuring effectiveness, I think ultimately, measuring yeah, effectiveness really isn't going to always be the same for each organization. So I think you have to know what your end game is. Like if you're an advocacy charity, you need to think about is your end game that you want the highest level of decision maker or policymaker to be aware of the issue and to be reframing it in their minds. That's going to be quite different to if you're I don't know, your ethically sourced home decor, Tashwa, to use your example, you might have a very tangible metric of, well, I need new leads, a potential home decor client. So yeah, and I think we can also get lost too much in what I call vanity metrics. It's like, oh, we've got likes or we've got opens or clicks, and I think keeping that those bigger ones in mind is more important. And then Christina Lafleur, thank you for your question as well. It's important to think of communication. Yes, yeah, absolutely. Sasha, if we start with one character, how do we diversify our stories? Yeah, that's a really good example, really good question, Sasha. So I would encourage you for this exercise we're about to do, I'd encourage you to think about who your primary audience is. Like who's the customer, client, beneficiary who's in the sweet spot, and do the story for them. I think a good example of where you probably need multiple stories or different stories is if you are an NGO and you have a donor base that needs essentially a case for support. I think this absolutely can work there, but that's quite a different story to having a beneficiary target audience that you want to buy into a certain program. So I think that's a good example where you do need to diversify. And then, yeah, that's the same question for you as well, Cassie. Okay, let's get into the next, let's get into the practicalities. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to share in the chat. I'm hoping I can share in the chat. Oh, okay. I wanted to share some files. Yeah, there we go. Right. So I am going to share a template with you all that we're going to use for the session. Hold on, which is assuming that the that this works. Right, let me introduce the model, and then I will see if I can get the files coming in the chat. So this is the StoryBrand script. So what this is essentially a slightly more detailed version of what I shared with you online. And you can go in, log in, and essentially create your own scripts on the website. It's my StoryBrand script. If you Google that, that will take you to this website. So essentially what this is starting to get into a little more detail. And this is where I want us to we're not going to get through all of this. We've got just under 20 minutes, but I want to encourage you to start to think about the answer to these questions and essentially plotting out your story. So the character, all right, what do they want? Who's the character? What do they really want? Has a problem. Now, again, the model breaks it down into four. The villain, is there like a root cause of their problem? Is there something external that you can point to and going, this is why life is tough, or being a business owner is tough, whatever. And that's quite high level, but that might help your narrative. What's the external problem that the character's dealing with? What's the internal problem? Just how they feel. There might be something more philosophical. Why is it wrong? What's the injustice about the situation? And then the guide, introducing yourself. How are you able to relate to their problems? Have you experienced this yourself before? Have you gone through this? Are you able to just recall the number of stories and the people, and how do you build a bit of empathy? And then secondly, a bit of authority. How are you best placed to solve their problems? Then we get into the plan. This is kind of the service offering. What are the 3 or 4 practical things you're offering to help address those problems? And then some sort of agreement, like a promise. What can you promise your character by way of alleviating their fears, concerns? And that might be that you go, actually we've got this rating on Trustpilot, or this is what some other people have said, or we know from experience, this is what people say to us or feel. And so again, how can you kind of get them to sort of feeling like they can buy into this plan? Calling them to action, then what's the direct immediate call to action, and then these transitional ones, what's like some phased calls to action that you might come in later on, like, okay, well, the next step might be this, and then we want to work on this. And again, thinking of direct, immediate, and this transitional sort of longer term. And then ultimately that ends in success. So what are some of the positive changes that your character will experience? And then again, helping them to avoid failure, listing negative consequences your character could experience. Now, this bottom one is just a simple character transformation. It might help almost like a from to, like, okay, from this to this, from isolated to whatever, belonging, or from lacking knowledge to having an abundance of resources. What is it what's the, almost simplifying it into a simple shift that the character, the audience will make. So this is getting a little bit more detailed, but at this stage, what I want you to be thinking about is how would you plot your story, the story of your brand, onto this framework. Don't worry so much about the exact wording. Don't think about it needing to be nice and crafted. This isn't that crafted piece of copy that I showed you on a page for Catalyst 2030. This is bullet points. This is you getting into like, okay, what is it that's really going on here? So what I want to encourage you to do is just to begin trying to answer some of these questions for your brand. And if we have some time left, I'm going to give, yeah, let's say, I don't know, give like 10 minutes maybe for people just to start to answer these. I'm happy to answer anything in the chat, any questions people have along the way. And then maybe the last few minutes, we can have a few people sharing their StoryBrand frameworks for the rest of us and for me to sort of, yeah, feedback on or comment on. So, and while I do that, I will see if I can locate or share these files. But either way, you can start to make some notes. So don't worry too much about the files not being ready just yet. But yeah, begin to just be making some notes around those points. Okay, I've just shared two files. One is a PDF and one is a PowerPoint. Again, feel free to use those if that's helpful. You can type into the PowerPoint slide to start to fill in some of the blanks. And very happy to take any questions people have or to help guide you in filling that framework out. Please put them in the chat. That's fine. Or feel free to speak up. That is also fine. And hopefully you're beginning to just get some ideas and inspiration around how you can introduce yourselves, your brand to your audience in a way that perhaps is a little bit different than you have been doing previously. And if anyone feels stuck on any particular part of the framework, please do, yeah, please do give me a shout. Yes.
Dave,
Hi.
I don't see the link to the framework. Can you please reshare because it didn't come through to me?
Okay. Yeah, it's showing as shared on the group chat. So you can't see anything in the group chat, the links. It is.
No, I don't see.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not. Let me try again. Aha, there we are. Sorry. It uploaded for me, but didn't actually go onto the chat. My apologies. Thanks for giving me a nudge. Yes, Olabi will be sharing the presentations. I assume yeah, Winifred or Torn, that's possible, isn't it? That we can share the slides afterwards. And Tashwa, if you are still there, yes, I think you are. So yeah, you asked about how you could use this for ethically sourced home decor. So yeah, absolutely. Think about who is that primary audience? What is the thing that's missing in their life? And I think what's interesting about your product, you're probably going to need to think about both a practical need and a quite emotive need, and the practical need might be around, I don't know, whatever, certain style of decor or the absence of something in the home that needs filling, but then there's going to be the emotive part, which is the ethically sourced. And what are you trying to, what's the gap, if you like, what are they missing that they want to fill with something that's ethically sourced, not just nicely designed home decor, and kind of just start to chart them through that journey. Like, okay, what is the thing that, and again, maybe the language, if you feel the language of problem is difficult, maybe think of it as, well, what's missing? What's missing in their lives that they're aware of? And then it's like, okay, well, this is who we are. And then how are we speaking into that? What are we offering? And it actually might be that you're not just speaking about the products physically, you might be speaking more about the mission or about how you deliver them, and just making sure there's a bit of an emotive thread in there as well. So I am going to ask whether anyone is brave enough to share their creations with me, with the rest of the group. Um, or just, yeah, we can just talk them through. So if you've kind of if you've made any notes and you would be up for, you know, either kind of talking me through your story brand journey, or just putting it into the chat, I'd be more than happy. Yeah, I'd be happy for you to do that. I'm more than happy to sort of take an opportunity to give you some feedback as well, if anyone is brave enough. And that's okay if you're not. And also, oh, Christina, you're up for it. I like it. We always like a guinea pig or the first victim or whatever. I can't hear you, Christina. I don't know if that's me or. Okay. It's the old Bluetooth on the headphones. I think Zoom hates all headphones.
Yeah.
Hey, there we are.
Hey. Perfect. It never works the first time. So I'm a communication researcher, as I introduced myself in the chat. And actually, the thing I said before my audio came on was, it's not so much a guinea pig as when you're at the doctor's office, you should speak up about the thing that's hurting you while the doctor's still in the room. So I'm a communication researcher. I partner with agencies like yours, and I had previously, as in my time in a big agency before I set off on my own and pivoted into purpose. And one of the things I had found back when I was working internally, but even now, is when I talk to communication specialists, marketers, brand builders, PR experts. A lot of the times I don't understand the role a researcher can have in their projects,
Yeah.
how it can make the work so much better.
Yeah. Great.
Um, so thinking about that audience, well, the end client problems are really clear and that journey is really clear. What I realized when mapping this out and mapping the agency's problems are, while the end clients are frustrated by their lack of efficacy, the conversations they want to shape aren't moving the way they'd like. They don't know what those conversations are, or they don't have a clear vision for how they can participate meaningfully. Agencies, when they have a problem, especially when they don't have a measurement function in place, is Zorkia, I think is how you say your name. Apologies if I mispronounce it, was highlighting, might push their interpretation of those problems off
Yeah.
to some other explanation. So they're curious, that didn't work. I wonder why that would be.
Yeah.
But they offload that ineffectiveness onto other explanations,
Correct.
which means in that journey, part of having that conversation is showing them that they have a problem that can
Yeah.
be solved by an effective
Yeah.
research.
Yeah, makes sense. Absolutely. Rather than oh, this is a nice to have additional service that we don't probably want to spend our money, that our fees from our client on. So yeah. Okay.
You're taking something from me
Yeah, yeah,
if
yeah, exactly.
absolutely.
Okay, well, go for it. Take it away, Christina.
Well, so once I'd identified that, I had been splitting my concept a little bit between it. So I've identified that that's where I want to build the story. But that's actually kind of where I'd left off, and to, kind of show everyone how, at least how one person works through their worksheet, spending 5, 6 minutes thinking about it.
Yeah.
I only got through the first column. Oh, okay, this is what that
Right.
problem could look like. Um, I know how a researcher can solve those problems. And the way I've done it to this point was I put in front of potential partners and clients the questions I think that they're asking that a researcher answers effectively. So a really easy one is which messages work best, right? That if they're already developing content, if they're already putting things in front of audiences, okay, which of those messages work best? Are you
Yeah.
just putting one thing and then not, and you don't know why it worked? Well, did you compare it
Yeah.
to anything else? And one of my favorite things to do also is trend monitoring and analysis. Where do you want to have a conversation and how much do you know about it? And I think that that's somewhere that I'd really like to build this guide, because I think agencies very often, because they become experts in certain conversation types, they rely a lot on that personal expertise
Yeah.
without necessarily reflecting back on what the research and the data can show them about how that space is evolving.
Yeah. So what's the core, if you could just say one thing that's the external problem that the agency, whatever owner or project lead, account director, whatever has, what would you say?
They're smart,
What's the
but they could be
tangible,
smarter.
huh?
They're smart, but they could be smarter.
Maybe. I don't know. I'm just hearing you talk. I wonder whether it is the big thing that we all dread, which is guesswork.
Mm,
Because there's a fear, right? I'm just speaking to myself
yeah,
now as a brand consultant. There's a
yeah,
fear that what if my hunch is wrong? What if
yeah.
our hunch is wrong? Because we're going on a hunch.
What if we make a bad bet?
Yeah. What if we make a bet? Yeah. If you really want to, yeah, you're right. That's nice. And you're jumping to the failure step 7. But no, I like it. You're right. What if so you're speaking into the problem they have is that they that there's an element of guesswork which creates an element of risk.
Yeah,
Um, I'm proud to know probably most agency owners, if they've been around long enough, have had their fingers burnt at least
sure.
at some point going, shoot, oh, yeah, you're right. We bet most of the house on black and it didn't go that way. So yeah, no, I like the way you're thinking, but you're right. I mean, ultimately it's got to be their problem, not the client's one, because they'll go, oh, I understand the client's problem. I don't need you to solve that. I'm solving that.
Absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
yeah. But great, thank you, Christina. Very
Thank you.
practical and relatable for me. Anyone else before we wrap up? Anyone else would like to either on the chat or speak up and kind of unpack, even if it's the first couple of steps? Okay, this is who I think the character is in the story, and this is the problem that they have, like Christina has done. Yes, speak now, or we will leave you with the worksheet to try and do some problem solving off the back of the session. And similarly, any final questions as well before we wrap up? Let me put in the chat just so being helpful to people. So you can go and create your own StoryBrand script online on my storybrand.com. You'll notice I've actually changed some of the descriptions on for some of the I've changed some of the descriptions for some of the elements of the framework. Uh, I think part of that is just because I think a couple of the way they frame them, I don't find it that easy to understand, and some of it's the language is a little bit more corporate. But I think you'll get the gist. But yeah, so feel free to either use the PowerPoint that I shared or create a login for mystorybrand.com, and then you can go and create, I don't know how many scripts, but you can essentially create scripts for different audiences or for different offerings. So hopefully that is another tool that you can use to help you. Otherwise, unless there's any last questions or comments, I will probably hand over to Joet or Ton to do whatever you do for the closing comments.
Okay, so we have a few things that we share at the end. So let me just do that quickly because it's 59. Okay, so we have an award show coming up later in the year. And so we have to start nominating a few people. If you know any social innovators that you think need to be recognized, you can just, we'll put the link in the chat so that you can start to nominate. And then you can find your favorite social innovators and help them win an award, hopefully. Then we have a marketplace called Catalyst Market. It's a non-profit and it's community owned. So we have different vendors that have different projects they are in and they sell on this marketplace. So we have gift cards and everything. So we are putting the link in the chat so that you can follow, and we're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. And yeah, so we've launched a chat bot on WhatsApp. It's called Ask Catalyst. This is the number. You can ask questions. If you want to be a member, you can ask it how to do that. Our website, any questions you have, you can ask on WhatsApp and it gives you the answers. Yeah, so if you want to join Catalyst 2030, become a member, we have a link in the chat as well, so that you can join the whole collective and the organization and make a difference. Lastly, we have a survey for feedback for the CTW. So this session in particular, or any other thing that you want to let us know about, good or bad, what we need to do better, what we are doing great, you can click the link and give us feedback as well. Yeah, so that's it. Thank you everyone for coming to this session. Thank you, Dave. It was a great session. And we'll see you guys in the other sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Bye.